I'm slightly aware of the time, so we're going to go straight over to Leah. Leah is the Learning Officer at the National Videogame Museum in Sheffield, and she's an experienced museum educator and outreach professional, specialising in STEAM themes and history. And during the pandemic, she ran the NBM at-home workshops and Pixel Heads Virtual Summer Club for families and young people, which won the Best Website Activity from Kids in Museums Family Friendly Awards in 2020, and also award from MCV Develop, the leading media outlet for UK games. So Helen, if you wouldn't mind stop sharing your screen, and then Leah can share hers. Hi Leah.
Hello. Let me just get my screen sorted. Okay, so I'm hoping that everyone can see my screen.
Off you go.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for having me. As Helen has said, I'm Leah. I'm the Learning Officer at the National Videogame Museum in Sheffield. So I run the learning programmes at the museum, including our seasonal activities, schools workshops, and everything in between, including our lockdown programmes. So to introduce the museum a little, the National Videogame Museum, or NVM, opened in Sheffield in 2018. So we're fairly young as museums go. The museum is dedicated to exploring the culture, history, and making of video games. So inside the museum, there are lots of games to play, as you might expect. Many are curated into different bundles that explore different themes in games. So games that are made in Sheffield, games that explore gravity and physics, and driving bundles, for example. And we've also got different exhibitions, such as Platform 14, which is a huge wall of screens that you can see on my screen right now, that explores different ports of video games, so the way that games change depending on the technology that you play them on. And this one explores the game Donkey Kong. So I wanted to start by sharing the way that I learned a lot of what I'm about to share with you, which is mainly stuck at home over lockdown, which I think is a very common experience over the last 2 years. So at this time, the museum closed. We're a very interactive museum. There's lots of things to touch and engage with. So we closed quite early. And once we closed, I was tasked with supporting our emergency fundraising effort and to somehow continue the learning programs from home. So I developed and launched a series of live streamed workshops. They were live streamed on YouTube, and learning resources that aim to get families and young people making games at home. So these were the NBM at Home series, and then Pixel Heads over the summer, which was a virtual weekly summer club for young people and their families. So I think, like most, I was stuck at home with no budget and whatever tools I could find online or in my own home. I know that sometimes if I say I'm from the National Videogame Museum, people expect a lot of fancy high-tech things. It's not the case. We were kind of stuck with whatever we had. Luckily enough, I did have a PC at home, so I could use that making these resources. But for us, it was really crucial to take into account that access to tech and to video games varies greatly. And this became even more evident during lockdown. So when I was developing these activities, I wanted to ensure that the game making tools that we used were almost entirely free and accessible on various platforms. So laptops, but also tablets, phones, and anything else that people had, as well as being easy to learn how to use. So for many, I think making video games can be potentially seen quite a daunting or difficult task. And that can certainly be true, can be a very difficult thing to do. But there are many easy to use tools that can get you started making your own games or even running game-based activities with no prior experience or coding knowledge. So that was the spirit that I wanted to showcase in our lockdown content, as well as the content we regularly run at the museum. And we had great feedback from the families who engaged. So some mentioned that they would never have thought that they could support and run a video game making activity at home. They didn't think they'd be able to, or they were slightly wary about doing that, but they did, and they had a really good time doing it. And we even won a Kids Museum Award for Best Website Activity using one of the platforms that I'm going to show you in this little talk. So hopefully not, but you may be thinking, why video games? Yes, they're a fun and entertaining medium. They're a great way to spend an evening, in my opinion anyway, but they're also a fantastic tool to explore a wide range of subjects and skills. So if you've ever played a video game, that can be any type of video game, consider all the elements that go into developing it. So you have the art and design, you also have the animation, the music, voice acting and performance, computing and coding and engineering, storytelling, creative writing, the list goes on, as well as the teamwork and collaboration that is needed to bring all of those elements together. So creating video games can be an excellent creative outlet, like any other kind of artistic medium, and a skill building activity for all ages. And it's in many ways much easier than you might think. So I wanted to introduce you to some of the tools that I use and show you how I use them. Some you might have seen before and others you might not have. So first off, I'm going to show you Pixel. I'm actually going to swap from my slides to show you Pixel. So this is Pixel. It's a website. It's a browser-based program, and it's a free online sprite editor. So if you've used Microsoft Paint before, it might look a little bit familiar, but put simply, it's a pixel drawing and animation tool that's free to use and can be used from a computer or laptop. So we've used Pixel in many workshops, but in particular, we learn how to create and animate video game characters. And in that activity, we also look at the history of characters like Mario, that you might have seen or heard of before, and explore how the technical limitations of the time helped shape the characters that we know and love today. I'll swap back to my presentation. So these weird and wonderful characters were made in a workshop using Pixel by our visitors, ranging in age from about 5 years old to grown-ups as well. And they range from very detailed characters like the dragon and the dinosaur that we have here, to simple smiling faces made by some of the younger audience members. So when we run this in the museum, we're able to take these characters and put them into a working game for visitors to play. But Pixel can also be adapted to explore a range of topics, as well as exploring changes in technology. We use it to explore creative writing and character design, representation and identity in games as well. For instance, we have a workshop where you create an alter ego or a video game character based on yourself. So you can imagine putting yourself in a video game. But it could potentially be used to recreate collection objects or even create characters based on historical figures or time periods. It's really easy to share your work from Pixel too. So there's options to save as an image, so you can download and share an image, but you can also download and share as animated GIFs, which are great to share on social media or in messaging service as well. So that's Pixel. Next up, a program we use quite often in our lockdown content and in the museum more generally is Twine. So you might have encountered this before. It is, just talk to that website. Oh, there we are. So this is Twine. It is a game making tool that allows you to make interactive stories that look a little bit like this. So if I click on a story that I've already made, you can see some boxes here that branch down and give your reader different choices. So if I test play, it should open a story that I've made. So yeah, this is Twine. You can use it to create interactive stories and adventures. And I can click to continue and it will show me another bit of the story, and I can click again and I can find more choices, things like that. So this is one that I've made. It's very simple. So let's pop back to my talk. So we use Twine a lot in our learning activities for a few different reasons. First off, it lets you create really simple stories and that are easy to share. And these are kind of branching narrative type stories. So think back to the choose your own adventure style books that you might have had as a kid. Another reason is it's really easy to get started. It might look a little bit complicated, but I promise you it's not. You can make really, really simple things, and it's free to use. So it's an open source tool that anyone can use, and it keeps being developed as well. So we often highlight the importance of creative writing and storytelling in video game development. Using Twine, we'll also get able to get people interested in being creative, reading and writing, as well as learning how to code and create a video game. So it's a really great skill building activity. So this Christmas and last Christmas as well, we used Twine to reimagine an existing story. So we created a game based on the story of A Christmas Carol, with some workshops that people could take part in as well. So in those workshops, we taught people how to use Twine, and we asked them to create their own part of the story that we would collect and put together. So in particular, they would pick one of the ghosts in A Christmas Carol, so either the ghost of Christmas past, present, or future, and then take Scrooge on a new adventure with those ghosts. So maybe the ghost of Christmas past will take Scrooge to visit the dinosaurs, or maybe the ghost of Christmas future will be opening presents on the spaceship, that kind of thing. We left it completely open. We allow people to submit, and we're going to rerun this, these workshops again this year and create an even bigger story. So we'll take them all together. The game is playable online and in Sheffield libraries, so people can read their own story and read other people's submissions too, and kind of reimagine that story. So Twine is also a really great platform for progression. So yes, it is quite simple to use as first off, but it can get more and more complex the more you learn and the more you get excited about making games in Twine. So you can add images, you can add video and sound, and the list goes on. And that branching narrative style can get more and more complex, as well as your stories get more and more complex as you add more choices for your readers and different branches of your stories for people to engage with. And that can be really exciting for people getting involved. So the last platform that I'm going to share with you is one called Bitsy, and this is a particular favourite of mine. Like Twine and Piskel, Bitsy is another free game making tool. It's browser based, so you can use it on the web browser, and the creator as well has just made a mobile version. You can make games on your phone too. So it lets you put together entire games with levels and dialogue, animation, and it has a really simple pixel art style that can be used in really, really unique ways. So during our Pixel Head live stream, we used Bitsy to recreate the museum from home. We asked young people to create an object in Bitsy based on a game that had been getting them through lockdown that he'd been playing, and we put it together in a mini exhibition. So as well as building games, it can be used to recreate real spaces or imagine new exhibitions, for example. So this also on my screen is an image of a game that I made on one of those live streams, where I took this kind of submissions through the comments so people could tell me what to put in the game, and we kind of built it together, sort of taking into account people who might have been a little bit younger engaging with that content, or who didn't have access to a laptop, because that was the only way that you could engage at the time. So we kind of built it all together. So I'm hoping that you can spot the little wizard in the maze and the snake as well that's waiting. Those are all kind of user submissions. One thing I haven't mentioned about all these platforms, and that is very, very important if you would like to use them, is that if you want to learn how to use them in particular, they all have really brilliant communities online of makers who have made tutorials and step-by-step guides about how to use these and make games in these different platforms. So for example, Twine has its own kind of Twine wiki that has got hundreds of tutorials about how to make games in Twine and how to add different things. And Bitsy has a great and active game making community who also provide step-by-step instructions and guides. They also have a monthly game jam where they come together with a different theme every month and they make a game. So you can see lots of other examples of games made in these platforms. So if you're not sure where to start, I really do urge you to Google it. It sounds really simple, it sounds really silly, but that's the best way to learn how to use these platforms, is just to have a go. And if you get stuck, look at those guides, look at those other makers who have probably answered those questions already. YouTube is a great place to start for tutorials about these platforms as well. Really, really good place to look. So I do have some tips for developing game-based activities, whether you use these platforms or not. And this is with some of the feedback from families that have engaged with the workshops and activities that we've run. So first thing is, it sounds very nerve-wracking, but don't worry about knowing everything about a platform or a tool before you start, and be willing to learn from young people too. So I definitely did not know everything about Twine before I ran an introduction to Twine workshop, but I knew enough to get started, and actually I've learned lots from running those activities, especially from young people who might have already been familiar with that platform, who have provided support as well, and ideas, and also just ideas about, oh, well, can we do this? And that kind of question starting point that's come from an audience, have come from a workshop participant, has let me go, oh, I don't know, but we'll find out, and we'll come back next week, or I'll share that on social media later, and yes, we can find out together how that works and how we can do that. But the best way to learn how to use these platforms is just to try them out for yourself, and to have a go. Lots of these they're really easy to start. Physical, for example, I just urge you to start drawing and animating, and then you'll find out what it can do and discover more and more complex things that you're able to manage. So when you're making those instructions or activities, like Helen said, it's really important to make those instructions really clear and simple, especially if you're talking about making video games, which can be a little bit daunting for some people and or feel like it might be really technical. Or another thing is to be clear about who the activity is aimed at, so know the audience, and being clear at the kind of level of familiarity or what they need to know before coming to the session. Do they need to be familiar with Twine to take part in a workshop, for example, or can they just turn up and we'll teach them how to use it? Also consider the familiarity with tech. We kind of take it for granted that everybody knows how to use a computer or a laptop, tablet, mobile, that kind of thing. And one of the biggest challenges actually with running workshops for young people is young people, especially, knowing how to use a mouse. I'm talking about very small, sort of under fives. Knowing how to use a mouse and keyboard can be quite challenging when people are very familiar with things like tablets. So what kind of tech do they need to be familiar with? Do they need to be adept at using a mouse, for example, to take part in an activity? So for family activities, we also made instructions for the grown-ups. We made instructions that kind of took you step by step through the activity itself, and that was aimed at everyone. But we also made some information sheets for the parents, the carers who might be leading that activity at home. So we wanted to basically make this a collaborative activity, so get parents involved, and also increasing their confidence. So giving them some information about the platform, so they knew where it was, for example, online, what the link to the website was, how it worked, if it was safe to use, that kind of thing. And also just support them in maybe follow-on activities, or what you could do next if they were finished and they wanted to do more, for example. So there's an example of that on my screen at the moment as well. So I've kind of said this already, but remember that like game making can be a group activity. So explore collaboration. You can get people making different parts of the game, different characters, items, for example. Maybe get someone making a backdrop and somebody making a character, or working on a story together, for example. Get everyone involved, and that includes parents. So video games as well can be very tech heavy, can require a lot of tech to make them or start making them, but they're also a great way to explore paper-based activities, or a combination of tech and analog, so tech and paper. So writing stories, for example, with pen and paper, making zines, or using graph paper to create pixel art. These can all be done without tech at all, or to support it as well. So there's definitely different ways that you can explore making games that don't require any tech. So I think I've come to the end of my talk. So there are a few platforms that I haven't even mentioned. So things like Scratch, MakeCode, Minecraft, as well as budget-friendly bits of kit, like microbits and makey makeys, but I think I've run out of time, so I'll maybe leave that to the Q&A. But I'm always happy to chat on Twitter or things like that if anybody has any further questions. Thank you so much.